A silent past behind stillness. Some stories aren't told with words. They're carried in the silence of those who've lived through what most would never understand. This is the story of such a man. In the heart of the English countryside, surrounded by misty hills and whispering trees, lay a small, quiet village named Elmsworth. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where gossip spread like morning fog, and where peace seemed to settle like dust on every windowsill. On the outskirts of the village stood a modest cottage shaded by tall, ancient oaks. A solitary man named Edward Whitmore lived there. People called him Old Ed, but no one truly knew him. He rarely spoke. Each morning, he would water his small garden, sit on the old stone bench, and stare into the distance, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as though waiting for something. Or someone. He never caused trouble, never asked for help, and never joined in the village gatherings. Children whispered stories about him. Adults speculated. Some believed he was a war veteran. Others thought he'd lost his family. A few said he had simply chosen a quiet life. But there was something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, thoughtful. His silence was not emptiness. It was heavy. As if it carried years of memories and unspoken truths. Time passed. One autumn morning, a young schoolteacher named James Ellis moved into the village. He was from the city, bright, driven, full of questions. James believed that every person had a story worth telling. And when he first saw Edward, seated under the oak tree in utter stillness, he felt drawn to him. Every day after school, James would walk past Edward's cottage and greet him with a cheerful good afternoon. At first, Edward simply nodded. Days turned into weeks. James remained consistent, sometimes offering a flower from the school garden, other times handing him a book. Then one day, James stopped and said, "Mr. Whitmore, I don't mean to intrude, but I can't help but feel you've lived 1,000 lives in your silence. I'd be honored to hear just one." Edward looked at him, eyes worn yet clear, and said nothing. But he gestured to the bench beside him. It was the first invitation. James sat down, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. And yet, something passed between them. Not words, but presence. Understanding. That evening, as James walked home, he felt something stir within him. Edward hadn't said a single word, and yet James felt he had heard more than from any speech he'd ever listened to. One stormy winter night, fierce winds swept through Elmsworth. Trees bent, branches cracked, and the sky roared with thunder. Lightning struck one of the oak trees near Edward's home. The massive branch crashed onto the roof of the cottage. Villagers rushed out with lanterns. James was the first to arrive. He found Edward inside, sitting in the corner, his arm clutched to his side. In his other hand, he held an old, weathered box. Without a word, Edward handed the box to James. Inside were faded letters, black and white photographs, war medals, and a worn sketch of a little boy with the words on the back, "To Dad, I miss you." James felt his breath catch. "Your son?" he asked quietly. Edward gave a faint nod, then spoke, his voice hoarse, as if unused for years. "I left for war when he was barely 5. When I returned, my wife had moved on. He'd grown up calling someone else Dad. I didn't blame them. I just vanished into the silence." He paused, then added, "People think silence is peace. But it's not. It's war, too. An internal one. With your regrets. With time. With yourself." James felt tears sting his eyes. "I never would have guessed." Edward offered a small, tired smile. "That's the point. Most people don't." From that night on, James changed. He became more than a teacher. He became a listener. In the classroom, he taught not just facts, but empathy. He encouraged his students to notice the quiet ones, to ask deeper questions, to listen with their hearts. And Edward? He never became a talker. But he no longer needed to be. People in Elmsworth began to greet him with genuine warmth. Children no longer feared the quiet man beneath the oak. Instead, they left flowers on his garden gate. And when he passed by, they'd say, "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." And he'd nod, with a smile. Some people speak less because they've heard too much. Some people walk alone because they once lost their way. And some people are silent not because they have nothing to say, but because they once said everything, and no one listened. So the next time you meet someone quiet, don't ignore them. Listen with your heart. Behind their silence, there might be a story that could change your life.